Today's podcast may contain some subjects that are confronting for some listeners.
As always, we use dark humour to process these as we go.
Right, everyone's had a Valium, everyone's had a nervous wee.
Recharged.
We are going to speak about a birth.
A birth. Well, welcome back to part 2 of the Imposter Podcast with Jess Taylor.
Thank you.
Talking about her motherhood experience.
Got it that time.
And we are going to dive straight into...
longer than I thought it was, sorry.
2 words I never thought I would say. Birthing story. So, Jess, we're going to step forward into your next imposter experience that you're happy to share with us.
Yes.
So what does that phrase mean? Tell us all about it.
So my birth story. So my daughter, I'll talk to you about her birth story, first child that I had. So
I like the way you say it's her birth story, like it wasn't, you didn't have much to do with it. She was just her coming out doing her own thing.
So I woke up at around 4:30 a.m. and I went to the toilet, which is something you do a lot when you're heavily pregnant in your last trimester. And you guys are probably going to be so grossed out some of the things that I have to say.
Al didn't sleep last night thinking about this.
Yeah, you're probably not going to sleep for the next week now, Al. So I go to the toilet and I'm in the bathroom. I'm like, oh my goodness, I think I just wet myself. This is so bizarre. So I turned the light
Watch Al's face. Look, he's got his game face on. He's like, go on.
Picked a neutral spot on the wall. Carry on, Jess.
I turned the light on and I was like, oh, okay, I haven't wet myself, but I think this is my water is broken. So like nobody ever tells you what that's like except for what you see in the movies. And later on I learned that a lot of women don't actually have like a natural water break. So I had one and it was full on. So I'm just standing there and I'm like, oh my goodness. I screamed out to my husband and I was like, I think my water's broken. And he's like, what? Like just all like waking up to that. And he came in and he was like, oh.
He's like, you're going to clean that up?
He's like, yeah. Okay, well, you clean that up and then we can talk about what's the next step in this. So I was like, oh, my God. And it was like full on. I was like, this is insane. What's going on? Anyway, you're told that if anything strange happens to call the hospital. So that's what I did. I called and they're like, oh, yeah, okay. No worries. Just when you can, come in and we'll check you out. And I was like, okay. So it's very relaxed. Like you don't expect that, but the hospital is usually quite relaxed. So probably about 5:30 we get into the hospital and they like check me out. Yeah, your water's broken. Cool. This is nice. This is good. Go home. And, you know, when your contractions are, I think they may have said like 1 or 2 minutes apart. At this point I haven't even had any contractions, so I'm not really sure what they're talking about. Come back at that point, like when they're 1 or 2 minutes apart. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, so I go home. I don't stay here. And they're like, no, you go home. So went back home, stopped for a bit of food on the way and got home, and it's just like a very slow process of like these contractions. They sort of came on but like extremely slowly. So like that's just like this intense pain that comes on for a period of time and then it stops. It's like a wave of pain, then it stops.
What is a contraction? Do you know?
So essentially it's the uterus opening up. So you have to get to 9 centimetres of dilation down there for the baby to be able to come out. And I believe that these contractions are that passage opening up essentially. That's how I understand it. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
It's funny because it says contraction but it's opening. I wonder if it's some muscles are contracting, which is pulling your uterus open.
Correct.
Wow.
Right.
Can you relate it to anything like stomach cramps, like,
it is,
or just totally something new?
Yeah, it's totally something new. You can't even explain it because you can't remember it. It's like the body forgets, which is why people have more and more babies, I guess, because it is hideous pain. Like it is the worst pain.
We might circle back to that. Yeah.
Honestly, it's just awful. So to put it into perspective, so I went through this, we got home probably from the hospital at like say 6:30 a.m. I went through it all day. We went for walks around the park and they tell you
this is after your water's broken?
Yep. So it continues to break, by the way, the whole time until the baby comes.
So you just keep?
Yes.
What does that mean? Like
I was lied to on
fluid,
not that.
like
fluid, constantly. Okay. Yeah. So I didn't know that. So at the hospital I went through all of my clothes. So like I didn't know that it continued for like till the baby comes.
I know this is going to be gross, but when your water's breaking, so is there like a seal on your uterus or something and then it breaks and then
I think it's called technically.
I knew this is going to be terrible.
It's really awful.
No men have ever asked these questions before. We're breaking ground.
I believe it's called something like a mucus plug.
Oh, yeah.
I believe that comes open and then the water can break, I think.
I knew I was going to regret asking that question.
It's like something that does break inside the uterus, I think, and then that's why it releases the fluid. So all day we just walked around and like.
See, because where I come from on this is like I've seen like Knocked Up, which I know isn't a medical expert documentary, but it's, you know, like they make jokes about if you're in the supermarket, you grab like you have a jar of pickles or whatever it is, you just drop it on the ground so no one realises that's what's going on.
Yeah, that's probably a good option.
Well, everything that Seth, what's his face, is a factual
yeah. Well, I've seen War Dogs. I'm sure that's legitimate as well. But it makes me. But after that, they're like, "Oh, your water's broken. You rush to hospital because it's happening within the next 30 minutes." So it's bizarre to me that they send you home and you cruise around the park just leaking all over the place.
I think it was 5 p.m. and I called back because they say call before you come. Don't just come. You have to call us. And they listen to your breathing on the phone.
Oh, okay.
And they make a decision as to whether they think that you are in that window of 1 to 2 minutes of contractions.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't do this anymore. By this point, I was in excruciating pain. I think it was about a minute like apart or 2 minutes apart. They're like, no, you can't come yet. You need to have Panadol and go and have a shower and come in about another hour or two. And I was like, sorry? Like, what do you mean? They're like, we're so busy. We do not have room for you right now.
That's what you want to hear.
And I was like, oh, okay. So I did what I said to do.
This is also during COVID though, isn't it?
No.
Oh.
This is before COVID.
Right.
So
I was just thinking all the beds are tied up with ventilators.
No, it was before COVID. So so then I think I lasted maybe 45 minutes to an hour, and then we got in the car in peak hour and drove down, Royal Parade to the hospital, which is a busy road, so it felt like the longest drive ever. And I guess the real story, the birth story, sort of starts at that point.
Did you have like you see in the movies how there's a go bag where like, we've got a plan in place, we've got this, with that, like it's a bushfire evacuation,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you've got like your bag with all your baby stuff and everything that you think you need, and you've got all your things, your pillow and all that stuff. So we go in, we check in, and they take you through and they take you to this little room, not far into emergency, like it's on the side, and they check you over, and like at this point I had not even...
We've just got a photo of you really enjoying your life, sitting on a bed.
That was like,
you're getting flashbacks?
I'm getting PTSD.
Happy face.
Oh my God. So at that point in that photo, I was like, just give me all the drugs, give me anything you can. And they're like, oh, no, we can't right now. You just have to stay here. I hadn't dilated at all.
So you're in pain or anticipation? Or
I'm in pain.
You're in pain.
So much pain, and I have not dilated at all, which is not good. So like, I would have thought, I'm going to have this baby any second now. I'm here. I hadn't dilated, so you have to get to 9 centimetres. I think I was at 1 and a bit, and I'd been in labour. I thought I'd been in labour since my water broke at 5 o'clock in the morning. This is like 7 p.m. at this point.
What's the – again, this is stuff I'm not going to want to ask, I'm sure. What's the where do you start with your – like when they say you're 9 centimetres dilated, like what's your original – is this over personal?
How big is the plug?
Yeah, it's like normal.
Yeah, but like what's normal?
Like
0.
Guys, what's normal is what's normal for women down there. You should know more than we should know.
I'm not talking about the actual. Oh Jesus, I'm going to move that.
So
I'm googling it.
So so I'm there, and then they say, "Oh, you know what? We can give you the gas." And at this point, I'm in so much pain that I'm just like, okay, but that was an awful experience. It made me very nauseous.
The laughing gas?
It's like, I don't know what it's called, but they put it, you have to like breathe it in.
Okay.
It's supposed to help with the pain, but it actually did not help with my pain. It made me extremely anxious. So I was like riddled with anxiety now. I'm not just in pain, but now I'm anxious. Now I'm like, oh my God, get this child out. Like this is too much. Or give me the epidural. They're like, no, I'm so sorry, we have no beds available, you need to stay here. So I ended up staying in that state, in that situation, So I reckon it was about 6:30, 7 p.m. I didn't get into a room till 11 p.m. that night.
Yeah.
So, and they don't let you eat either. So I wasn't allowed to eat any food. So then at about 11:30, they asked me if I wanted an epidural. So about by midnight, I'd had an epidural.
What's an epidural?
It's a needle into your spine, right into your spinal cord. You're not allowed to move. So you're having these intense contractions and you're not allowed to move at all, because if they get the needle into the spine wrong, it can cause serious damage and effects. So put the needle into the spine. You have to be really quiet and calm. It can take up to 45 minutes to get it in. And then once they get it in and it's all set up, it sends some kind of fluid, I believe, a drip fluid that's like your spinal block. So from your spine downwards, you can't feel anything. It's numb.
Okay.
So this is where my story goes a little bit skew with, I guess, in comparison to some other people. I couldn't feel anything from my boobs down, like at all. I couldn't even move my legs, couldn't feel my own boobs, nothing. Like everything was completely numb. I didn't even know I had legs. It was the weirdest feeling ever. So at the same time, I had to have this thing called an induction. An induction is where they pretty much try and bring on your labour. So they try and get you to dilate a lot quicker than your body is dilating.
With the dilation, just old Dr. Google over here, it says here you won't be able to feel your cervix opening. Yes, what you will feel is the uterine contractions that work to stretch it open.
There you go.
So I'm assuming the uterus
But
is...
now, so do you still feel that, or you're not feeling anything now?
So,
and now you're alarmed about that?
Yeah, so at this point I was like, wow, I can't feel anything. I can feel pressure of the contraction. They stayed pretty much the same, but you can't feel anything opening up, like, because I was all numbed. I couldn't feel anything. I didn't know what was happening down there. They just kept checking every 4 hours to say how much further along the dilation was. So I'd be waiting every 4 hours. Please tell me it's almost 9. This went on for the whole night. So from midnight all the way till 7 a.m. I still hadn't gotten past 3.5 centimetres. Yep. So I hadn't eaten since I got to the hospital. Since before I got to the hospital, I had all these different medications running through my body, the induction, the epidural, whatever else I'd had before I even went into that room. I was anxious, what's going on? This is so long. So then, eventually they said, we are not able to get the induction right. The machine's just just can't get it right. So we're going to do shift changeover and we're going to get 2 new nurses in here and we're going to get them to try and sort that out. So they got these 2 new nurses in that were really lovely, and then eventually they sorted that out and I dilated to 8, and they're like, okay, we've got 1 more centimetre to go, and I think it must have been maybe 2:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah, okay.
And I was like, okay, great. They're like, we're going to start pushing at 9, which is probably another hour away. We're going to practice for a little bit and then we're going to do the real thing. So I'm absolutely exhausted. I haven't slept a wink now. I'm just anxious. I'm hungry. I'm shaking, tired. I don't know what's going on. Why is this taking so long? I never expected it to take that long. In the movies, it doesn't take that long. So I was so confused. Eventually I did the full 9 centimetres, and they're like, okay, we're going to start pushing, and that was just a whole new ball game. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to breathe. I didn't know where I was pushing from. They kept saying, you're not doing it right. You have to push for longer. Don't make noise. You need to breathe through this way. I was just I couldn't even feel where I was pushing from. I had no feeling. I had no they're like, come on, keep going. I'm I don't even know. So I was just so tired.
That's one thing that I thought about with the epidural not being able to feel going down there. They're push, and you're like, I can't feel my legs. How do you want me to? Do you reckon you could have got up and walked around?
Oh, I couldn't even move from one. I couldn't even move on my side. I couldn't even move my legs. I couldn't feel them.
That's what I mean. It's funny that they're telling you to do something. You're like, I think I am.
Yeah, I was saying that. I said I'm doing that.
Yeah.
My biggest concern was what was happening with the baby inside. Like, this is a long time to be under that amount of stress. I was just like, what's going on with the baby? They're like, yeah, the baby's fine. It's fine. And I was like, okay. So when I started pushing, I just was like so overwhelmed and anxious and struggling so much. I was just like started saying, just get the baby out, like just get it out. I can't do this.
Yeah, it turns into panic.
I was panicking, and they're like, okay, well, you need to do it. We're going to use some instruments. So I had to have an episiotomy, which is they had to cut.
Am I Googling?
There.
Okay.
It's
I'm not
awful.
Googling it. I've had enough images from the cervix thing.
Yeah, I didn't see or feel it, which is great, but my poor husband did. So I think he's scarred forever. So that happened.
I just looked at him. He's rocking in the corner.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
Pretty sure there's an Australian saying that links to this.
Oh, should we write, mate?
No, something about your favourite pub. I don't know if I can say it out loud.
It's all right. We'll move on.
So then had that, and then they had to put some kind of tool. It's like a suction cap that goes over the head of the baby to help pull the baby out.
Well, they used to use like metal claws.
They do. They still do. They're called faucets, I think. So they use this thing, and they wanted me to push, and I was trying my best. I was so tired. Like, I tried, and then
At which point did you say I should have had a C-section?
oh my God, I was asking for it like for the whole day. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
Not that was my plan, but like I was desperate. I was so desperate. I was like, just get this over. This is so not what I expected.
What sort of prep work had you done beforehand?
Not much.
Like, going some of the classes, did you have any of this information, or did they not bring this stuff up? Or
So no one had told me any of this. Probably silly of me. I probably should have done a breathing birth class. I didn't even know that was a thing. I thought birthing classes were more about breastfeeding and
What to do after birth?
They did that in Knocked Up, I think.
The natural
Educational,
process of the actual birth. I thought it was more about how it comes out. I didn't really think about like the breathing side of it and where to push from. I'm sure that's all covered, but I didn't think of that. I did actually sit down and speak to a midwife, and I asked a lot of questions. We went out for breakfast. So I thought I was a bit prepared. I was definitely not prepared at all. So then eventually the child came out. We didn't know the gender at the time, but this was probably the most scary thing.
So they had a contraption with a suction cap on the end of it on your baby. You'd been cut open. You'd been in there for how many hours before this happened?
This was 36 hours.
When they just started yanking it and cutting you open?
Well, no, since since I went in, my water broke, it was 36 hours. But they count labour from, probably they would have counted labour from when they put the epidural in.
Okay.
So this is around 4 p.m. On the 4th, and they would have counted the start of my labour probably from 11 p.m. on the 3rd. But
you counted from when your water broke. Yeah, that's fair.
So then the baby comes out.
I'm not trying to cheapen your story yet. Anyway.
The baby came out, and this was when it was very, very, very scary. It's not something I ever was prepared for or expected. But she wasn't breathing, and usually the baby cries after they rub its back or whatever. We had nothing, and we had a rush of all these doctors just rush in the room, like so many. I couldn't even tell you how many. It was like full on. And they grabbed the baby, and my husband, like, I've never seen him cry ever. I've never really seen him show much emotion in that respect. He was just like pale looking at me, and he was like quivering. And like, I just remember looking at him and thinking that the baby was dead. I was like, I've killed this baby, like, because I struggled so much with trying to get the baby out. I was like, oh my God, what's happened? Like, I was just full of so much anxiety, so much medication. I wasn't thinking straight. I was just like, thought the worst. And the doctor and the midwife were like looking at me, no, it's fine. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And then my husband's like, everything's going to be okay. And I was like panicking, no, what's happening? What's going on?
It's like, I'm hearing your words, but you're sitting here looking at me crying.
I was like, I can't hear the baby. I can't hear the baby. What's going on? And they took the baby away, and it was actually, we actually have it recorded. My husband actually pressed the voice memo on his phone thinking that the 45 minutes of this like pushing would be really beautiful. So we've got this whole thing recorded. This whole thing is recorded, so I know what it says. So they're like,
so podcast 3 is literally just an actual birth for 45 minutes.
So But they're like, they take the baby and they're like, just listen, just listen. So like after a minute, they're like, just calm down and listen, just listen. I can hear this one doctor saying, just listen. And
so who are they saying that to?
To me.
To you.
Just calm down and listen. And I listened, and then after it's 1 minute and 30 seconds, we just hear the baby cry. And we were just so relieved, and everybody was like, the whole mood in the room changed. Everybody was so relieved, and they had to do a few more checks of the baby, and then they did about 30 minutes of checks on it, and then eventually I got to hold the baby and we saw that it was a girl and,
How long does it take to use a suction cap and cut you open and pull it out? Like, was it pretty quick after that, or is that like how long did that part go for?
I think it was pretty quick. Maybe within 10, 15 minutes. But it was a lot to do with me. I had to do the breathing right and the pushing properly, and I was totally confused. It's like my brain and my body couldn't connect.
Yeah. Well,
I just couldn't get it to work.
But you can't feel it.
Couldn't feel it.
It's pretty hard to, it's like when you're blind drunk. Good luck trying to be.
So was that, aside from how high you were, couldn't feel anything, is that
how high you were? Like she'd gone in and smoked 3 cones.
I wish.
Sorry, but I mean, you said sort of would be from the waist down, but is that how it should have felt, or did you have a totally different reaction to most women?
So I learnt through my second birth that no, and speaking to other women, totally went wrong.
Okay.
You're not supposed to be that numb. That's not how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to still be able to move your body.
Like, you were paralysed essentially.
Yes,
it wasn't just a pain thing that they'd executed.
And the strangest part was I wasn't, so you're supposed to press this button to release the epidural based on your level of pain, and they kept reminding me to push it every so often because I wasn't pushing it at all because I was so numb.
Paralysed you? Yeah.
But they said if you don't keep pushing it, there was a reason why that you needed to keep the momentum going. But I was like, well, I don't feel like I need this. So every few minutes they were like, or every 30 minutes, whatever it was, make sure you press that button. And I was like, okay, well, I can't feel a thing. I can't even feel like that I was like to the woman, can you just go check that I haven't gone to the toilet because I have no idea what's going on down there.
But at the same time, that happens anyway, doesn't it?
It does.
So even if you were like, I did. Yeah.
Thank God. I was convinced it had happened to me, to be honest, because I couldn't feel. So after 30 minutes, they brought the baby to us, and then they said to us that unexpectedly she was a very, very big baby, which, I think that contributed to a lot of the problems.
Well, I've seen your husband's head, so it makes sense.
Yeah, she was very, very big. So I think that for me being more of a petite person, and she was 4.5 kilos, and she was born on her due date, which is like very rare that a baby will ever be born on its due date. So she was like quite a good sized baby. They said that probably contributed. But yeah, afterwards, so then I held her and I fed her. And then very quickly.
So did you, when you say you fed her, as in, did you breastfeeding? Mm-hmm. And that's obviously the first time that's happened as well.
Yes.
And how was that for you?
So strange. It's so strange. It's the weirdest concept and thing. I know it's so natural, but it's.
But like you talk
so
about
weird.
like being, like the whole pregnancy thing being sacred and all that sort of stuff. But like, did it, like when you're actually feeding your child that way, like was that what sort of experience is that? So
for me initially, it was very special, very sacred, very like this is like human nature at its like most divine. It was beautiful, but I guess
I have heard that some women struggle, like it's hard to get it started or do whatever, and then like I don't even know. There's no way you can practice that, is there? There's not a
no. It's true. I struggled.
Shut up, Al.
There's no way you can practice that.
Well, we should not be doing this.
But I mean, we've wrongly assumed that like it's just intuitive and it's
not for everybody.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't for me. I had a huge amount of problems breastfeeding, the latching, and I just never knew if the baby was getting enough, or like I sort of like did my own head in about, I don't know if she's on properly, if she's getting enough. Like it was a lot for me. Like it wasn't natural for me whatsoever.
Like how are you supposed to know if it's like? I mean, this is terrible. What are we doing here, Al? But like, how do you know that it's drinking? Like you can it can look like it's doing it, but how do you know if there's stuff coming out or not?
Well, You can tell if there's stuff coming out because you
we need to do a disclaimer on this one, Al.
Squeeze it and your own breast and milk comes out. So, and then they're sucking. So, and you can see a bit of milk. So you know, but you don't know if they've latched properly to get enough. Like you don't know how much they're actually getting.
Yeah.
Which is
and do they just drink till they're done or like?
They're supposed to, but like if they're not latched properly, then they keep wanting more because they're not getting enough. And at the start, they get you to express this stuff called colostrum. It's like this thick
you could buy it. I'm pretty sure colostrum's a thing that you could buy back in, I don't know if you still can,
really?
but it used to be a thing that footy players and stuff were on back in the day.
Okay. Well, they get you to take
really
it out.
high quality protein.
It's very good for the baby. And you put it into a syringe and you syringe feed them that until your milk comes in. And then once your milk comes in, then you can either express it out with the machine and give it to them in bottles or you can breastfeed. And I did a combination of everything because our daughter ended up having a breathing problem from the birth. So she ended up having to be in ICU for a week. So I had to do a whole bag of mixed different feeds because I wasn't with her all of the time.
And again, I don't probably want to get into this, but with the machines, like you're just sitting there, is it we're talking 1 cup, like 1 cap, 2 caps, you just like, is it a pump? Do you have to do it yourself?
There's 2 types. There's a hand one that you put on that you can do yourself.
Yep.
Like it's like essentially like you squeeze it like and the air comes out and it pulls the milk into it. Or there's one that you plug into the wall that sits on 1 or 2 breasts and it like essentially it's like a cow being milked, if you imagine, and it just like pulls the nipples and takes all the milk out and it fills up these bottles.
And is that
pretty incredible,
is it
honestly.
Painful? Is it not a big deal? Is it enjoyable?
It's definitely painful initially
until
right. Your boobs adjust to the feeling and get used to it. It's the same with breastfeeding. The sucking is very painful initially. Mm-hmm. Like it's full on. Like it really hurts until your boobs get used to it and then it becomes more of a natural thing that doesn't hurt so much. So yes, both things do hurt, but
and how long do you need to sit on the machine for?
I became obsessed with this machine.
Why do you look so scared, Al?
I don't know. She's saying it hurts and then like obsessed with what?
As in not with
she's
the
into
feeling.
BDSM, that's what she's saying.
I became obsessed with making sure I had enough milk coming out to feed the baby. So I know now from my friends that have had babies that you only need to have it for about 10 minutes, on for 10 minutes. But like, and probably I was doing it for about 10, 15 minutes in the hospital, but once I got home, I'd do it for up to like 30, 40 minutes.
Was that a security thing? So you knew you had enough to feed her?
I became like obsessed with making sure I had enough milk. Like you become a bit like your whole world's just about feeding this child and you want to have enough of the stuff to feed it.
Just thinking going over to your place and then just like, you just go grab a drink from the fridge over there's like 45 bottles in there just waiting.
Pretty much. It pretty much was so much. And you have to do it every 3 to 4 hours, yeah? So you either feed the baby with the breast every 3 to 4 hours at the start or even 2 to 3 hours. And then if you're not breastfeeding exclusively, you can use the pump the same amount because you've got to generate that milk at the same time every day. And if you skip one, you lose that supply. The body's phenomenal. So, so then I went through that process with my daughter and, so she stayed in hospital for a week, which I got to learn a lot, which was probably a blessing. Like I met so many different midwives and nurses and I learned so much about the baby's routine, which was good.
Learned a whole bunch of stuff that you could have used before during your pregnancy?
Probably not during my pregnancy because you can't really I don't know if you can really prepare.
Breathing classes.
Maybe the breathing probably would have been helpful. But the stuff I learned was more about how to look after the baby once I had the baby. So then we went home from hospital and then that's when
So how long were you in hospital for?
7 days with my first.
Because you said you got they did a bunch of cutting you and stuff like that.
Yes.
So did you have to get whole stitches and?
Yes, full on. It was a lot of stitches. Yep. Probably how many centimeters is that? 5 to 6 or 5 to 7 centimeters worth of stitches. Yep.
I don't want to. I was going to say, do I not ask where that's cut? Because I've heard some pretty big horror stories between your rectum and your just being torn and then it turns into the one hole.
Well, that didn't happen to me, thankfully, but it's in that sort of space, yes, between,
the gooch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nah.
This is so terrible, Al.
So, yeah.
We're going to stick in our wheelhouse with shootouts and stuff, I think, in future.
So
Right.
yeah.
So you've got home, you're breastfeeding, you're on the machine. How did you – because you've gone from that where everything's brand new. Epidural is the first time you've done it. Breastfeeding is the first time you've done it. Obviously, it's the first time you had a child, first time your water's broken and stuff. How did you go into the second one, and did you feel confident the second time after you'd done it, or did you – because – I mean, the whole reason you're on here is because you'd heard our earlier podcast and say that you felt like an imposter doing the mum thing. And that was, to me, I was like, wow, we literally have something in common that I never knew that we would have. How did you transition from having your first child to the second one, and what lessons learned did you have from the first one that would help you the second time around?
I think so much. I learned so much from the first experience, and it was pretty traumatizing to me. So I wanted to ensure that the second experience was pretty much as, as controlled as it could be. So the first thing I focused on, I had gone to a different hospital. I wasn't very happy with the first experience, and we'd moved areas, so I was happy to try a new hospital. But from my first appointment with my doctor, I'd said that, I obviously can potentially have a big baby. I want that to be one thing that's monitored throughout this pregnancy. So I actually got allocated to my own I've forgotten the name of what the doctor is.
Obstetrician.
Thank you. Obstetrician. So I had my own obstetrician at the public hospital because I wasn't private, and she was monitoring my case every time I had to go in, which I think was monthly. And she agreed to ensure that I could have ultrasounds for the last 6 weeks every week to monitor the size of the child. I knew it was a boy, so he was monitored, and that gave me a lot of peace of mind because then I could be more planned. We'd agreed that if the baby was going to be close to 4 kilos, that I could have a C-section if I wanted to.
Four's large, isn't it? Like anything over 3.5 sounds large.
Yes. So Lily, my daughter, was 4.5.
4.5?
Yeah, she was 4.5. Yeah. So with my son, I was like, oh, okay, I just want to make sure that doesn't happen again, that I have to give birth naturally to that size baby. Like, it was hard for my body. So I made sure I had these ultrasounds, which everyone was really great. I had them, and
that's about 10 pounds in case you're that way inclined. 4.5 kilos is 10 pounds.
Yeah, she was a big baby. She came out the size of a 3-month-old child. I'm not joking. If I showed you a picture, people were like, oh, that's a newborn? Oh, my goodness. She was the biggest baby that ever had in my
I mean, newborns are normally surprisingly tiny, like shockingly tiny.
Yeah. So she was in ICU, as I said, and she was the biggest baby that I ever had in like ICU because they were all prem babies.
Yeah, premies, yeah.
Yeah, she was huge, like, in comparison to those babies.
Like stole all their lunch money and stuff.
Pretty much.
So ran that joint within the first 2 days.
Probably why I was obsessed with having milk because I need to feed this child that loved to eat. So with my son, I had these ultrasounds, and I actually went into, same thing happened. My water broke with him spontaneously 3.5 weeks early. And I actually had an ultrasound that day, and they said he was around the 4 kilo mark-ish. And it was 3.5 weeks early, so I was lucky I didn't have to have a C-section.
Well, you'd already made it larger than it needed to be, so you probably could have had your baby at 6 months. Yeah. That's efficiency. That's what we need to be. We need more of.
So that day, again, I went in and I was a lot more controlled. So, I spoke to them about things that went wrong the first time and how I wanted it to be different the second.
Did you feel a lot more calm, like knowing what you were going into?
So much more calm.
Did you elect for a C-section second time around?
No, because I went into natural labour, which was unexpected, very early. And
so you can't. Can you not jump? They do emergency C-sections, though, don't they?
They do, but they don't really let you just choose a cesarean for
on the day.
No good reason. Not in the public system. If it's private, I think you have the option to choose what's best for you because you're paying for it.
They're like, here's some Vicodin. Would you like a drink? We'll do all the work.
So the public system was like, so I had gone into labour and it was a totally different experience. So I did have a strange thing that happened though. I was very relaxed about this. I was like, there's no way I'm rushing to the hospital. They ain't getting me. Like, oh, this, I know better.
I've got another 40 hours.
I know, I've got another 40 hours,
I'm
exactly.
going to play golf.
Right? Yeah, I hadn't even packed a bag, nothing, no baby bag. I didn't expect this. It was my first day of maternity leave, right?
Oh, day one.
Day one, didn't even get a break, which was, and I was like, far out. I'm definitely not rushing into that hospital.
You should have lied to your boss and just run it out, just not told him you'd had it yet and just go, I'll ride this out. I'll be laughing.
So like I was just like, I'm not doing that, but I had to call them and let them know because I knew that my water had broken, so I had to do the responsible thing. So I called them up and they're like, oh, this is going to gross you guys out. They're like, oh, can you just tell us what colour the water is, the liquid that came out? And strangely enough, it was green. And I was like, oh, it's a bit green. And they're like, oh, yeah.
Hell, I don't even want to talk.
They're like, you definitely need to come into the hospital as soon as possible. And I was like, I was like, you don't have me fooled. I'm not coming in.
Yeah, I ain't coming in there to just get told to go again.
That's what I said. I said,
and I'll do my own epidural, thanks.
I said, no, I'm not coming in to get sent back home. They're like, no, it's quite serious. It could mean that your child's actually pooed inside you and it's very dangerous for them because they could be ingesting that, breathing it in. I was like, oh, thinking to myself, oh, yeah, okay. But she's like, no, I'll give you maximum an hour and a half to 2 hours max to get into this hospital. We need to check on you and the baby. And I was like, oh,
I'm giving you an hour and a half. She's like, all right, we'll turn up.
Yeah, she's
I'll
like,
be
you
there.
You need to. And I was like, all right. So then I went and had a shower and packed my bag and I was like,
You're like, I don't believe you at
yeah,
all.
Exactly. And then, I did get dropped off at the hospital and I get in there and they're like, yeah, we're right. The child has put inside you and we've got two options. You can risk the baby's health and just wait for this to go naturally, or we can give you an induction, which is what I had the first time. And I was like, oh, but at this point I was actually quite dilated. I had dilated heaps. Like I was like at 4 centimetres at this point and my water had just broken. It was miraculous compared to the first story. I was like, okay, if it's a safe thing, of course I'm going to choose to do the induction if that's what you're saying is a safer thing to do. So I had this induction and my plan wasn't necessarily to have another epidural because my experience was so negative the first time. But when you have an induction, I feel that for me, my brain…
I have no idea what induction is, sorry.
So it's when they bring on the dilation. So that when they try and get you to dilate quicker with hormones.
Oh, with hormones. I was like, what do they just
like
jam something in and
it's like a synthetic,
do it themselves? Or I was so grossed out right now.
You were busy Googling when we went through this in part one.
Oh, really?
Oh, sorry, in child one.
So it's like a hormone that they put in or a synthetic medication. I don't know. It's something that they put into your body that brings on the contractions that helps dilate you quicker. And for me, I felt like it was happening so quick that I was getting very anxious. The pain was so quick that my body went into a bit of shock. So imagine going from zero pain to like 2 hours later being like a 10 out of 10 pain.
Oh,
like,
I've had man flu. I know what it's like.
Yeah, well, you can really, really understand. You
can
totally
really
get
empathise.
it. Yeah, you can empathise.
Yep.
It's just, isn't it so bad?
Yep.
So
Can last for days.
Lasts longer than childbirth. So
it
I feel your pain.
So basically, so I went in, had that, and I was like, okay, I'll just, I got to a point where I was like, okay, I can't really cope with this. I'm just going to have an epidural. And it was a really great experience. So I could feel my body. I wasn't totally restricted and numb like the first time.
Did you get grumpy? Going, this is what it should have been the first time?
I was so confused. I was like, how does it go from one extreme to the other? Like I could actually move around on the bed and everything, like change positions on the bed, and it was really, really great.
That's a tip for young players that are coming into it, that you look into what an epidural should feel like. Because, I mean, if you don't know what you're supposed to – like if I had an epidural, I'd just be like, oh, good, switch that all off. Just do whatever you got to do down there and pull it out.
And when I asked, they said, no, it's normal to be completely numb. Like the next lady – the next hospital, the next nurses were like, no, that's not normal. What you're feeling now is very much how it should be. And then this birth was beautiful. Like I knew how to breathe. I had meditation music on. It was completely silent. I've got it all on footage as well. It's filmed. So it was really calm.
Can we put that on YouTube?
Yeah. God, I think everyone would have a heart attack. Poor Al would definitely faint.
Yeah. He's been very quiet.
The chair's just propping me up.
So that was, the birth story was really lovely. Like, the baby came out, he was cried. It was like what I imagined it to be like for the first one, and it was really lovely. And so I stayed in hospital again for like almost 5 days, which is a long time because he was a premature baby. but he was
Even though he's bigger than the rest of them.
yeah, he was. He was 4 kilos, just under 4 kilos, but he was prem. So they said you have to stay at least for 5 days to just have all the checks and everything. And
then on day 3 when he started shaving, they were like, yeah, no dramas.
So that was that story, and it was a much more positive story. It was really, it was a really good note to end the birth stories on, to be honest. Like it brought things back for me and made me feel less, I guess, negative about the experience of having a child, and really made me feel, okay, this is good. My mum was there for it all, which was really nice, and it was a good story. So
how many people can you have in the room?
So with my son's birth, it was in COVID, and we had just had a break from one of the lockdowns, like a very small break, and I was only allowed to have
between lockdown 16 and 17.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I've lost count of how many there are.
I'll spiral again.
So basically, I could have one person other than my husband. So I had my mum, which was really great because, you know, a lot of people weren't even allowed to have their husbands in. A couple of months before, I had friends that weren't even allowed to have a husband in the room, that to do it, I think, by themselves, and their husband was in another part of the room.
Oh, that was the thing we brought up as husbands. We all brought it together and said that we're all going to go to the pub because that's what they used to do in the 50s, and that's where we're comfortable.
So yeah.
How many people did you have at the first one?
No one, just my husband. That was by choice. I think I could have had 2 more people because that was before we went into COVID lockdowns at all. Before even COVID was really a thing, I had the first child.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So 2 children, and then you get home, getting into the normal routine, and like we talk a lot about all this lifestyle routine, all the Andrew Huberman stuff we've talked about. What happens, like you were a young couple and now you've got children at home? What happens to the routine?
There is no routine other than keeping these children happy, healthy and alive, essentially. So the whole routine is just about them. It's just about keeping them going, really.
When you talk about like you had a loss of identity and then you've come past and now now your first identity is a mum. You know, it's like you went from being Jess, now I'm a mother and I'm Jess. It's like what sort of stuff have you started incorporating now? Like, is there an age where it's just too hard, you just can't do it, and you just like you're a mum and you're just surviving as a mum? Or is there things that you reckon, you know, like now that you've had 2, if you're going to do it another 4 times, I mean, you're Italian, so there's probably going to be a bunch more of them. Like, what stuff would you do differently? You know, like, would you come out and then go, I'm going to make an effort when my baby's, once it's not breastfeeding anymore or whatever it is, that I'm going to start working out, I'm going to do my own thing, I'm going to go to arts classes, or like, is there anything that you would suggest people try and force themselves to do?
It's a very hard question. I think I was in COVID, so it was limited in what I could actually do, to be honest. Both first 12 months while I was at home were in COVID, so we had so many restrictions. It's sort of hard. But look, when I got past the 6-week zone of like everything's healed and you're all clear to sort of work out, I did start walking and doing home workouts, which helped sort of with, you know, the fact that you're doing the same thing all day, every day. It sort of broke it up a bit, gave you a different outlet. But I think it's really important just for every mother to go on the journey for what suits them. I know a lot of mums that just love being in the bubble, especially after their first, second, third. They just, some of them sort of embrace that time at home doing nothing. Just being with the baby is like the best time because it's such a short-lived time. Really, they're so dependent on you, but it's a really short amount of time, although it feels like a very long time for some. It's actually really short in the like span of their whole life. So some mums just like to be in that bubble, but for me, I think my experience was a bit hard from the respect that because we were forced to be in a lockdown and I couldn't go anywhere, it sort of made me want to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Because I felt like really trapped. Like it wasn't like my free will to say, oh, I'm just going to have a day off now and go and do this, because I couldn't do that even if I had the time to do it.
Yeah.
But I would say that every mum and new mum should really follow what feels good to them. Like if you're a mum that needs to go for for a walk or to the gym and it's just a few weeks after or whatever it would be, even if it's just a light amount of exercise, but you need that, my advice would be to just do it. It's really important to follow what feels right for you and to not try and get sucked in by all the pressure that you feel that you should be doing a certain thing, because just your new job is just to be a mum. So, yeah, I would say that if it feels right for you to go for a walk or to read a book or to sleep or whatever it might be, I think doing that is really, really important. Not fighting with yourself about what you feel you should be doing at that given time, because it's very tormenting then.
So when you say that, like what sort of stuff did you feel like you were did you feel like you were being selfish if you did something for yourself, or like what sort of stuff you're tormenting over?
You do feel like you're being selfish. You do feel like, I should just be at home, with the baby, and why do I have this urge to like get out and to do something for myself? Like you just feel like a bit guilty, like, it's this constant sort of sense of you should be with the child the whole time, and it's such a special time and it's such a beautiful time and it's such a blessing, like why would you not want to be just with the baby? But reality is before you had this baby, you were your own person, and there's certain things that you needed as your own person to feel happy and fulfilled. And you don't just lose all of that because you've got this baby. So I feel like if I wasn't in COVID, I would have liked to have, had the experience to go out and go for a walk or go for a coffee with a friend or have brunch or, go to an actual gym or do Pilates or whatever it might be, just to have that time just for yourself on your own.
It's interesting because I hear a lot of similarities with a mum who's just had a baby, and it's like my identity is a mother. Whereas we have, like in first responder world, you go somewhere and all people speak about is their job. So it's like they might have been at that job and then they've been working for 8 hours plus they do overtime, and then they come back, then they knock off, and then they debrief about the job, and then you see them on the weekend after the job if you've got a weekend off and they're talking about the job. Like it's all day, every day, it's all encompassing. And you lose any identity. Like if you go, oh, what did you get up to on the weekend? And they're like, oh, nothing. I just sat at home getting ready for work the next week, or I was thinking about I need to do this paperwork or I need to do whatever. And I find that with mums as well, when you meet them, you're like, oh, how you going? Yeah, good. Little Johnny's 6 months old now, and now he's breastfeeding, he's doing this, he's doing that, or he had his first solids the other day, or it's like, cool, what have you been doing? They're like, oh, like I'm a mum. Like, what do you mean, what am I doing? It's like, well, is there anything else involved or whatever? And then, but it's interesting that the flip side of that is that you feel guilty about if you're like, oh, I went out and I did a weekend away or whatever, and I wonder if the feeling you get is you're worried about being judged by other women, because I don't know any guys that are going to judge you for doing your own thing, because blokes are like, oh God, I need my own time. Whereas as a mum, especially if you're feeding, like you're doing the breastfeeding, you're doing all that sort of stuff, it's, if there's no bottles in the fridge, for example, it's like, no, I'll do it. I'll do this. Because I know there are mums who wouldn't put bottles in the fridge because they'd be like, oh, no, it's like, that's my job as a mother. I will breastfeed it anytime it screams and that sort of thing. Or, whereas guys will be like, well, I'm happy to help. I'll get up at 2. And they're like, no, it's my job. I'm feeding the baby. And it gets all encompassing. So it's interesting to see that at some point you almost, and that's where I'm asking you, like, is there a point where you need to go, I actively need to do something for myself? Because we have a lot of people with like PTSD or mental health issues and things that just sit at home and they just think about stuff. Even though they've been out of the job for 6 years, they might still be living in that life. And you've almost got to force those people to do something new. And it's different, obviously, as a mother, because it's a beautiful thing, whereas we're talking about just reliving traumatic experiences over and over again. But you've got to force yourself out of that and almost do that. So I'm just wondering if it's harder as a mum, I guess, because it's a role that you've got for the rest of your life now, and doing stuff for yourself, again, like you're worried about judgment from other mums, you're worried about judging yourself, like the torment and stuff that you have. Like that's an interesting concept that I never would have picked with mums. But so I don't know if you've got any advice for young mums on when because again, it's very personal.
Yeah. I think it just has to be your own unique journey. And if you're happy to just be in that newborn baby bubble and just to be at home and that's what you want to do and that's what suits you, then that's so fine. It's a great way to be. Like there's nothing wrong with that. But I do feel that a lot of the women that want to still have a life outside of being a mum, like if you feel that you need to do something for yourself, small or big, I would just encourage you to do that, because it's only going to make you a better person and a better mother. It's the truth. Like every time you walk away for even a couple of hours from your family, that could be the father or the mother, and you come back feeling a sense of recharge and reset, and even maybe a little bit more motivated because you've maybe spoken to someone and gathered a different perspective, or you've done something that's challenged you in a different way. For me, it just makes you a better version of yourself that you're offering to your child or to your partner or whoever it might be. So my advice would be just to do what is right for you. And if that means going to yoga or going for a walk or going to church or reading a book or just sitting in the sun, having a rest, and you to ask somebody to help you to make that happen, I really encourage mums to do that, because your mental health does really suffer. You're sleep deprived, your nutrition you're deficient in a lot of things. You are now caretaking for this baby. You've never done that before, or you're doing it for the second or third time, and then that's an added stress because you've got another one you're looking after. It's like a whole new amount of stress and demand on your nervous system. I just really encourage you to do what you need to do to be the best version of yourself in a healthy way. I've learnt a lot along my journey, like along the way on my journey, that, you know, for me, it's really about the healthy outlets that get you through and that help you to come back refocused. Like, I wouldn't say I have anything against people that go out and have a drink or whatever it might be, but for me, that doesn't really make me a better person when I come back. I'm more tired and probably more irritable, but like if I go out and have a big walk and a really good debrief chat with a friend, I come back and I feel, whoa, like I'm recharged, I'm reset, I'm inspired, I'm ready to go. So yeah, I would just encourage new mums to do what they need to do to get through motherhood the best way that they can. You really are in a survival mode. You are. You don't even know this mode exists. You don't. Like, my youngest is 2.5 now, and I'm not really in survival mode every single day, but I still feel like I am to some degree. I'm just trying to survive, like, and make sure that they're healthy and happy and that I'm okay and that my husband's okay. But at the early phase of becoming a mum, you're just fully in survival mode. You really are, because you're sleep deprived. You guys know best how hard it is to function correctly when you don't have the right amount of sleep and you're up every 2 hours to feed, and that sleep's broken for like days and days and weeks and months for some women on end. And then obviously the breastfeeding, if you're exclusively doing that, then you're taking this energy from your body for that whole period. So like, yeah, I just think women need to be easier to themselves.
Do you have anything for the partners? Like how can they do stuff to help you out? Obviously your tolerance needs to be quite high to just go, she's cracking it, but I'll deal with that.
I think that it's a long time post birth that the husband just needs to have a lot of, or partner, a lot of patience and understanding, and just be there. Like, try not to be judgmental or to like, you know, think that, you know, you're not the only one that's suffering. I am too. It's not really like, it needs to be more focused, I think, on the woman, because essentially the woman's just gone through this whole pregnancy. Your sleep's already severely decreased throughout that because of how uncomfortable you are, and your body goes into some sort of mode before you have a baby, months before, where it sort of starts to prepare you for being awake. So you're awake from when you're actually having, like when you're pregnant. So you've already starting with sleep deprivation, essentially. So for husbands, I would say just to be really patient, really kind and understanding, and just offer as much support as you can. Like if you are working and you're tired too, that's hard. I get it, but your wife is working and it's hard for her too. So she needs that extra support. Like, offer her a break for a couple of hours on the weekend or after work, or pick up the slack. And yeah, I just think the husband just needs to be really understanding, and it sometimes can be up to like 1.5 years Like it depends.
So just accept that it's going to be unfair. You're going to have to work long hours to pay for things, and then you're going to have to come home and then take over because she's being she's going to lose her mind if she doesn't do it. Yeah,
essentially.
But even like
it's a real challenge. It's a test.
But even if you have, like you're saying, if you go for a walk or whatever. So if somebody works, they come home, and then they're like, you know what, go for a walk, have a 30-minute walk, come back, because at least then it'll give you time to go for a walk and chill out. It'll give him time without you having to go at him for 30 minutes. And it gives you alone time with your child as well. So I think, that could be something, but again, everybody's going to be different. If you don't want to go for a walk, you're like, I don't want to go for a walk now. It's just, I think a lot of it will just be accept the fact that it's going to be hard. And then if both people can sort of chill and have a bit of tolerance for each other, understanding that you're both sleep deprived and that sort of thing. But
I think it's the biggest test on any relationship. It brings out the worst in you. It's the truth. Sorry, but being sleep deprived and being stuck in a routine, whether you're the partner or the mother, like the partner's working and then supporting you and he's sleep deprived, and you are, sleep deprived and keeping this child alive, and you're both irritable and you're both cranky and you both are loving it, but you're both also craving so many other things about your old life, which is totally normal, by the way. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, yeah, no, I never miss my old life. I never miss not having to wake up at 2 a.m. and then 4 a.m. and then every 2 hours. No, I never ever miss that. That's a load of crap. Of course, I wish that I didn't have to get up during the night. But you've just got to understand that's going to be one of probably the hardest times, biggest tests for you and your relationship. You've really just got to speak to each other and be honest and just try and support each other and listen to each other.
Have you got any podcasts or any any YouTube channels or something that you'd watch that you'd recommend?
I actually.
You were saying before, go and watch a birth.
I would definitely recommend watching a birth and doing some kind of breathing birth class, if that exists. I'm sure it does. Podcast I listened to for the first. We were in COVID, so I would walk on my own for like an hour a lot of the time. I tried to, or when the baby was sleeping, walk. I listened to a podcast it's actually called Do You Effing Mind? And it was actually really good. But there's so many out there. I think like even Huberman, I've listened to quite a few of his podcasts. Have been really helpful just to incorporate different things into your routine, your life outside of just the routine of the parenting side of things. But in terms of for baby and parenting, for some reason I never really got into that. Like I would be more the type that if I had an issue or a problem, I'd Google it or ask somebody that was in the same position and then work through that. Like sleep consultants, if you had a problem with sleep, you might contact one of those. But I didn't really listen to anything for parenting that I can remember. I listened to more about how to cope. Podcasts on how to cope with life and challenges and my mental state. And I found being a new mum a major challenge mentally. Yeah. It tests my resilience more than anything's ever tested me. It's been probably one of the toughest jobs I've ever had to do. It's really, really been something that's tested every part of who I am.
So we'll end up, we'll wrap it up here, but just in relation to what we do with everybody with challenges is we were wondering if you would be able to take a class, which will probably end up being an all-male class, I would suggest, when what are you qualified in again? There's yoga, Pilates.
Oh, Pilates.
Yeah.
No, it starts with a Q.
Oh, no, Koya. I'm actually in a bit of a training program for this practice called Koya at the moment. Yes.
I'll have to look up what that is before I sign up.
Tell us what Koya is, Jess.
Guys, so I knew you were going to ask this question and I should have written it down. I'm not I'm not explaining it's really not a strong point for me at the moment because I'm still learning it. But essentially it's the premise of it, I guess, is that through movement of your body we remember, and we remember our true selves and our true being. So it's through wise, wild and free. It's essentially, that's what it says. So it's through the wisdom of yoga movement, and then through like your whys, your true essence through movement and being free to dance in your own way. So it's basically you dance like this kind of practice and you do all these movement practices that are supposed to like really bring your body and your mind back together to itself without all the like the layers that we take on.
So
no one mentioned dancing.
I know.
Before
yoga. We've been stitched up. That's what's happened here.
It's a lot of dancing.
Wow.
And shaking.
So teaching something is one of the ways to achieve mastery.
Okay.
So
so once you're ready to go, we'll do a class.
Okay.
Myself, Al, Fedora will turn up, and hopefully Troy doesn't listen to this beforehand, but Troy will also be attending. So Troy has 150,000 followers on Instagram. He's a massive deal, but we'll get him to come in. He doesn't know this yet, so
oh my gosh.
you'll have to get this on the down low. But
fitness followers, by the way.
Yeah, fitness chicks. So it'll be interesting. But so we'll get you to run us through a class, and then
Sorry, mate, we need a time frame on that. Can't be open-ended.
Well, it's going to be after, because we got to challenge him. He's here for the next month, 2 months. Okay. So we'll hit him up before he goes back to Dubai.
In the next 2 months?
Ideally by Sunday is the plan. Anyway, thanks very much for being the first non-first responder / military, first female, first mum, there's a lot of firsts here. So thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jess. And a great imposter perspective for the future mums and the men in their lives to understand a bit more about this process, a big part of their lives.
One of my favourite parts about this was the biggest imposter thing was Al talking to me last night, this morning, everything else. He was so nervous.
We've pushed our boundaries. Have two men ever sat down and asked these sort of questions?
Well, I dare say at some point in life it has. All right, we're out.
Podcast.
See you later.